Hi, I'm Nina Cooke, and thank you so much for joining us today for the Entrepreneur's Inner Game podcast. I have a very special guest. His name is Tom Ross. Tom is the founder of Design Cuts, which is a global community of 400,000 creatives. He's obsessed with building disruptive brands and highly engaged communities online. He's also lived through the hustle culture movement, eventually putting himself in hospital, having major surgery, to come out the other end and grow his team to 16 full-time staff and push his company to new heights. Tom, welcome, a very warm welcome to the Entrepreneur's Inner Game podcast.
Thank you so much, Nina. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's wonderful to have you here and have a fellow Brit on the show, which is absolutely fantastic.
This is going to be the most well-spoken podcast of all time.
I'm sure. So Tom, the hustle culture. We live in a hustle culture, don't we, as entrepreneurs?
We certainly do, yes.
So, this obviously put you in hospital and you came out the other side and, with imagining with great learnings and insights and all of that. Can you talk a little bit about that? What it's like to be an entrepreneur in today's hectic online world and how you manage it with your mindset now?
Yeah, it has been an absolute journey, to be honest. And I think it's such a pertinent discussion to have because people are starting to wake up, I think. Hustle culture has been around for a few years. I really got embroiled in it about 6 years ago, around the time of starting my current company. And no surprise, I found some of the common influences in that space, such as Gary Vaynerchuk. And I started just consuming this stuff. So every bit of content I was putting between my ears and I was watching was shouting at me to hustle harder. And at the time, it was really exciting because back then it wasn't quite as popular. I feel like the last few years it's really taken off. But back then it felt like I'd stumbled across a kind of secret drug. And that sounds crazy, right? Because hard work has been around forever. But the way it was packaged up was so extreme. It really was like a magic bullet almost. And so when I started consuming this content, my action started to shift rapidly. And whilst I'd always, worked somewhat hard and I'd done fairly well at school and that kind of thing, I think historically I'd maybe been a bit of an underachiever. So I would get good grades, but I'd do the minimum to get them. And that's how a lot of my life had played out. And at this point, it just came along at the right time. And I thought, you know what, I'm finally going to go all in on what I love to do. And so I did, and I took it to some pretty ridiculous extremes. So for the first year or so of my company, I worked 18 hours a day for 7 days a week.
Wow.
My slight respite, I might occasionally do a 12-hour day on a Sunday or something, but it was over 100 hours a week. And that's no hyperbole. I tend to be quite all or nothing as a character. So when I'm consuming this thing saying hustle and work 15 to 18 hours a day, I thought, okay, I'll go for the 18. And somehow I kept it up for a year. And I think I was able to do that because, as I say, it was at the start of my company and we saw traction pretty much immediately. And so that becomes very addictive because it feels like the harder you work, the better you do and the more success you get. And so it doesn't really feel like you want to hit a ceiling with that or like you will. It feels like it's going to be indefinite. And so I saw it, I'd do another 100-hour week and the company would do better. And so it worked more and more and more and more. And it was really intense. It was all consuming. I've been talking about this recently, and I think what a lot of people do, it's become trendy to hustle, right? So they'll be on social media, I'm hashtag hustling hard and, tagging Gary V or whatever. I think a lot of people are out there hustling, but I think a lot of people are kind of purporting to hustle because it's cool and maybe they're not. And that's totally fine. You can probably tell I'm not a huge ambassador for hustle, despite having done it myself. But I think what is damaging is when anything becomes a trend because it sweeps up young, impressionable people in particular. And I firmly count myself in that camp. I was very blinkered. I didn't really see the bigger picture. And I think that tends to happen when you're working all the time. You're having less conversations with people in other spaces. you're seeing much less of your friends and your family. And so the only conversation you're having is with the influencers shouting, hustle harder at you. And that's a one-way conversation. And so that can be pretty dangerous. And whilst I struggle with it still, because I can't say it doesn't work, because it did work for me to an extent. It let me grow the biggest company of my life. So hard work definitely is effective. I think what isn't effective, certainly not long term, is hustle. And I think there's a distinction. So you can work hard and have some semblance of balance, but hustle for me is indicative of a lack of balance. And that's what started to happen. So aside from the time I would sit down, wolf dinner down for 5 minutes, I was living with my girlfriend and her family at the time. So I joined them for dinner, wolf down some food for 5 minutes, and then say, sorry, I'm going to have to let you finish. And I'd run up and work. My girlfriend would go to bed and I'd go and kiss her goodnight. And then I'd go back next door and I'd work until 3, 4 in the morning. I would be falling asleep on my keyboard and I'd pick my head up by my hair, slap myself around the face, drink some coffee late at night, and then plug in a Gary Vee video. You should be hustling. And so I thought, yep, okay, I'll keep going. And to the point, it was like a form of self-torture, I think, in hindsight. And, red flags started coming up. My business partners were saying, you can't keep this up. And I was so energized by it and so addicted to it. I'd say, oh, of course I can. Like, screw you. And some of my business mentors would say, aim to get one thing done a day. And that's a successful day, ticking off one big project. And I think, well, I'm getting 20 projects done a day. I don't need to listen to you. And I think it's symptomatic of when a business is getting early traction. You feel like you can take the world on. You feel invincible. You're running on adrenaline, and it's a really powerful feeling. It's the biggest high possible, I think. And, especially when you're an entrepreneur, there is no feeling like it. It's a really, really amazing feeling. And so I was so caught up in all of this, I didn't see what was coming. And soon enough, I started to break, and I started to finally hit burnout about a year or so into my company. And I went comatose for 2-3 days because I couldn't do anything. It was like I had the flu, but I didn't. It was just mentally shot to bits. And from there, I started getting burnt out more and more often. So at first it was every few months I'd hit this wall again, and then it was every few weeks, and then it was every week, and before I knew it, it was every day, and it was constant. And I just thought, what on earth is happening to me? I used to feel like Superman with this stuff, and now I feel like I can't even function. I feel like I can barely respond to an email. And I thought that was going to be the worst of it, but it wasn't, because then my physical health as well as my mental health started really suffering. And so I had this cough which developed and developed. I started being physically sick for 2 hours every morning. So I'd wake up, I'd be sick in the toilet for 2 hours. Sorry to get graphic. And then I'd have to shake myself off, drag myself into the office late morning, and then I wouldn't really feel right all day. And this got worse and worse and worse until I ended up being diagnosed with a hiatus hernia, which I believe is somewhat genetic, but it's massively exacerbated by a hyper stressful lifestyle and that kind of thing. So my doctor basically told me that I'd worked myself into the ground, and that had exacerbated this condition. So I ended up undergoing stomach surgery, having an incredibly rough 2-year recovery period.
Wow.
I was on a liquid diet for a month, and I lost 2 stone, which I couldn't really afford to lose. I was already a naturally slim guy, lost all my kind of strength and muscle. I was in agony every time I ate. It was just so painful to eat for years afterwards. And the whole time I couldn't stop, because I was running and managing my team. So I couldn't just have a sabbatical. I couldn't take a day off. I had to keep going and keep pushing through, which meant my body couldn't fully heal. And so what began was was really the 2 hardest years of my life, where I, for a long time, thought I would never get better. I thought I'd ruined my entire life because of hustle culture. And that was the most terrifying thing. So I ended up going to see a therapist and eventually a personal trainer, and having to rebuild myself. But my physical and mental health was just absolutely at rock bottom. And it was a really, really tough period. And thankfully now I'm back to my normal self. I'm out the other side, and now I'm trying to really champion balance and, you know, working hard, but not blindly buying into hustle culture and not seeing the red flags, which I missed. So I
Yeah,
really,
that's amazing.
that's,
Amazing what you went through.
it's an incredibly long answer. I
No, that
apologize.
is an incredible story because you literally worked yourself into the ground, didn't you? And it became,
Yeah.
it was almost like a drug. It's so addictive. And you see the results, you put the effort in, then you see more results, and then you just keep going on this hamster wheel.
Yeah, it was like nothing else. I really felt like I could do anything. It felt like I could be the exception to the rule, never burn out, and just keep going forever. And obviously, we're all human, and that
Yeah, we're
definitely
not
wasn't there.
Superman, are we?
No, even if you feel like it
Even if you
sometimes.
feel like it. So, how do you do things differently now? Obviously, you've got huge learnings, huge insights going through this, coming out the other side. So, how do you do things differently now?
So I think a big lesson it taught me was delegation, because it was ridiculous before. I was trying to do virtually everything myself, which is never a good idea. So we've got a fantastic team now. I've actually learned the power of trusting in them more, giving them full autonomy. And so the team has scaled up a lot from that point. We've now got 16 full-time people in the office, various remote staff as well. So there's over 20 people every day working for us. And funny enough, that frees up a lot of my time to, you know, not only find some balance but work hard on the things I should be doing as CEO. So that's been a big learning curve. I think as well, just trying to live balance. A big lesson I've learned is that you are your business is you, but you are not your business. It's something I tell a lot of people. And so what I mean by that is, if you're a wreck, then your business is going to be a wreck. But you are not your business, because you can operate independently of your business. You can have a relationship, you can have friends and a life away from your business, but your business cannot escape you and your health. If you're having a bad day, or you're tired, you're burnt out, whatever it might be, as an entrepreneur, generally that will spill over into your business.
Wow, amazing. Balance is it's a wonderful word, but everyone has a different view of what balance is in their lives. So, what does it mean for you?
It means an eternal struggle, to be honest, Nina, because I wish I could sit here and say I've got it down. I think I will always have workaholic tendencies. I love what I do, and I have to marry. I have to think about the harsh truth of, if I constantly do what I love doing, then I won't enjoy it and I will burn out. And that's quite a bitter pill to swallow, because sometimes I feel if I could, I would work around the clock still.
Mm.
Something that's been helpful for me has been my list of must-haves. So that's things where I hold them up and I say, I need to hit these every single day. And that's things like 8 hours sleep, 10 minutes of meditation in the morning, 2 liters of water, exercising 3 times a week in the gym, and various things like that. I think it's about 10 items long, and I don't hit them every day. So today I kind of rushed into work because it's busy, and I didn't meditate, and I probably feel less calm and mindful because of that. So I think the trick is not to beat yourself up, but it's to have a list which you can come back to and think, okay, I got 50% done today, so I'm gonna try and work my way back to 100, because I know when I do the things on the list, that's kind of my sweet spot. For example, I know I can work about 12 hours a day really hard without tipping into burnout. And you need to work out what's relative and specific to you, because some people might genuinely be able to work 14, 15 hours a day and be fine. Others might only be able to work 4,
Mm-hmm.
and that's fine too. And the analogy I tend to use is, I know I'm never going to be the world's strongest man or fastest man, and I'm cool with that. You know, I'm not built for those things physically, so why should it be any different with work? I think with people like Gary Vaynerchuk, and I'm not kind of calling him out really, because I've got a lot of respect for what he's done. This is not a negative rant against him, but I think what people need to realize is he might be one of the best people in the world at working hard. So the same way I can't run 100 meters in 9.5 seconds, and I can't lift a ton off the ground, I probably can't work 16 hours a day. And that's completely fine. And you have to realize you probably wouldn't want to either, because
No.
with with the fastest man in the world, think of the training, or the strongest man, think of the diet and wrecking your body probably at an early age to hit those heights. they,
Yeah.
they have their own sacrifices, but they also have a different genetic predisposition. I know I'm not very good off very little sleep. I've got members of my team who can be fine off 5 hours, 4 hours sleep a night. If I get less than 8, I'm not 100%. So you need to stop holding up these influences and thinking I need to be a carbon copy of them. You need to work out your own limits and operate realistically within them and set realistic expectations. So I know if someone can work effectively 15 hours a day and I can work 12, they're probably going to beat me, but that's fine.
Yeah, it's not competition, is it? It's the quality of the work that you do rather than the quantity of it.
Yes, yeah, exactly. That's what I mean in terms of quality work. That is, and believe you me, sometimes I struggle to hit 12 hours of quality work as well. So I'm constantly adjusting. Maybe I end up landing on 10 hours because I realize actually I get better work done than 12.
Mm. And in terms of how we can be more productive, because obviously you're hugely productive. What is your mindset around that, around being focused, getting stuff done in the time available? Because everyone has a different amounts of time they can work. Some people will be working around family, some people will be, have various time restraints. They may not be able to do 10, 12 hours on their business every day.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the best way of getting the most out of the time that we spend at work so we can be as productive as possible without burnout, without this hustle culture creeping into our lives?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. I think an important thing to note is if you have less time, I genuinely view that as an asset in many cases, because I think you waste less of it. If you've got 2 hours a day, you don't really have time for busy work. It forces you to prioritize and focus. For me, the most effective thing has been time blocking. And I've tried all types of productivity hacks over the years, the Pomodoro technique and all that kind of thing. They don't tend to work for me, and I don't think they work for most people. Time blocking, I think, is something which is actually a sustainable method. So before you go to bed, or at some point when you finish that day of work, you simply block out the next day everything that you want to get done and when. And when I do this and account for every 30 minutes in blocks or 60-minute blocks, and I force myself to stop what I'm doing at the end of that block, I will literally get a week's worth of work done in a day. And it's something I'm really trying to push for more. You've got to be realistic, so don't block in an important thing every 10 minutes for 8 hours straight. That's crazy. But I found it incredibly effective because I'll get to the end of a meeting and suddenly it pops up the next one. I'm like, oh, sorry guys, got to jump in that next one. And I just seem to tear through work.
But that's a really great tip, and thank you for sharing that. So I'd love to find out more about your mindset about growing your business. So you worked crazy hours, all of that. So that's a negative side of it. But how did you manage to grow your business? What was your thinking? Obviously, you were thinking big. There was nothing stopping you. You were going to just got your head down and you were growing. Did you get scared at some point that this business is just growing and I'm not growing with it? Were there any times like that? How was your thinking around that? How was it able to expand as your business was expanding?
How was I able to expand my own psyche, you mean, around that?
Yes. How was your mindset growing? Or was it always at that place where you knew you were going to do something really big?
No, it wasn't. I think to an extent you just learn on the job and you have to adapt. You have no choice. So, for example, I'd only managed remote teams before, and it's completely different learning to be an in-person manager. It's been one of the biggest learning lessons of my life. I continue to learn every day from the amazing team here. And you don't have a choice, right? I have to manage these people. So I'm either going to figure it out and try and improve as a manager, or I'm going to do a crappy job. And now, we've got this incredible team. Things are quite a lot easier because we're just like a big family. And of course, stuff needs work and tweaking. But we had some rougher years where I had to learn a lot of hard lessons. I had to learn how to fire people and how to deal with staffing issues and motivate people and all these things. And it's literally just a case of chuck yourself in at the deep end to an extent and learn on the job and just try and be proactive about it. I think you need to care enough to want to be better. So I was going home and trying to soak in as much information. I was trying to talk to peers and mentors. I was trying to be more introspective as well. So often I'd lose sleep because I think, could I have handled that better, or is there a different way of doing that? And just trying to, even listening to friends and family, so many of them have always said to me, they work in traditional 9 to 5s, and they say whether I work at half speed and effort, or I completely kill it and work super hard, my boss doesn't bat an eyelid either way. So I used to work super hard, but now I don't bother. So I always make a point with our team of telling them great job each day at the end of the day, to appreciate them, and publicly calling them out in front of the team when they've gone above and beyond, and all that kind of stuff. And that doesn't cost you anything. That costs you 10 seconds of your time. But I'm certainly not the greatest manager in the world, but I at least try to be, and my intent is pure. And I'm consistently shocked by how bad a lot of managers are. I think they can be quite self-entitled. I think it's really important that you need to look after your team. You need to almost be like a parent and a mentor and a teacher and all those cliche things, but they're cliche for a reason, right? And I've seen them play out so many times. And it is true, as a CEO, you tend to walk in to a different problem every day. I'll jump from one meeting into a meeting with someone having health issues, or something that's gone horrendously wrong in their personal life, or someone that's feeling stressed or burnt out at work, or some infrastructure thing falling apart for someone else, or a market shift, or whatever it might be. That becomes your job. And I think for me, certainly, a lot of principles don't play out like you think they will. So you can read the business books, and I've even had staff kind of try and show me this and be like, oh, like, here's some good business advice. And it's like, thank you, great, and I'll take it on board. But there's a difference between reading it in a book and how it plays out.
Yes.
Like, massively.
It's a big difference, isn't it?
Yeah, because anyone can be like, here's the system to use. But people are people. You can't just drop them into a system and expect them to behave the same. So it is a constant juggling act and struggle and challenge. But it's unbelievably rewarding. And the people are the most challenging part of the job, but also hands down the best part of the job.
And how have you dealt with setbacks in your business? It can't all be smooth, plain sailing. And you talked about, obviously, when you ended up in hospital. So what's your mindset around that? What's your inner game? How do you deal with that and carry on moving forward?
I think it depends if you look on a micro level versus a macro level. So on a micro level, stuff goes wrong all the time. I think you need to not dig people out on it. I tend to say that I'm the last line of defense. So quite often, I did it last week, I sit the team down and say, guys, like, ultimately this is my fault. It's not their fault. It's not their fault. Like, I should have had my eyes open for this. So I think trying to shoulder some of the blame is actually a good way to deal with that. On a macro level, like, for example, with my health, it just takes a bit of grit and fortitude at times. I think you just have to be quite strong-headed to get through it, and strong-willed. And I think when screw-ups happen and things go wrong, one of the most powerful things you can do is publicly and sincerely apologize. I've done that several times. Something goes wrong, send out an email, send out social media blasts. Here's a apology from our CEO. And that's really effective, because often you come out looking better than before you made the screw up, because we get comments all the time when we've done that saying, this is why I love you guys. You're honest, you're sincere, you're transparent, you wear your heart on your sleeve. And so when you really mean it and you stand by the setbacks and mistakes, I think it can actually be fantastic in terms of what it does for your brand.
Yeah, it shows you have real integrity, doesn't it, that you care?
Yeah, and that's all long game. That's not a short-term funnel system that's going to extract 5% more conversion out of people. We talked before this call, I think we're both very much on the people side of business.
Yeah.
And I think when you respect your audience and your customers enough to treat them like people, not sweep it under the carpet, not try and just, sell them the next thing, but actually respect them and have integrity, that really maps out well for the long term.
Yeah, I completely agree. So what would be your number one, your top mindset tip for our listeners, coaches, consultants, experts who want to grow their business, but they may have some fears around, their pricing, being more visible, connecting, reaching out to people, lots of different fears. What would be your number one mindset tip for them to, to get more momentum in their business and to take bigger action?
Well, I'm glad you said action. My tip would actually be action over inaction. I think so much comes back to that. For me, certainly in business, when I was a bit younger, I would live on paper. I'd live in my head. I'd draw out these elaborate hypothetical business plans, and the execution was the bit that was missing. So that's been the most transformative thing for me, is just to be doing and taking action all the time. And you're going to make mistakes, but if you're moving forward and you're taking action, then you learn from them. There's nothing worse than people, I think they're called entrepreneurs, aren't they? Where you nothing worse, and I've been there. I'm not razzing on them, but there's nothing worse in terms of what's going to give you poor results when you're just living in your head and you're doubting and you're pontificating and you're planning, but you're not doing anything. And I've got friends like this. It's really annoying. They come to me with quite a good idea and say, I'm going to do this. And then weeks pass and nothing happens, and months pass and nothing happens. I think that's the most, that's the most damaging thing any entrepreneur can do. I think you're probably not an entrepreneur if you never take the execution. That's the most fundamental mindset shift. I would encourage people, get out and do it. There's suppliers we work with, they didn't really get traction until their 9th product. And if they had been hung up on the first one, they wouldn't have got anywhere.
Yeah. So don't worry about failure. There's no such thing as failure. It's all about learnings, and you're still moving forward. Even if you feel you're not moving forward, you still are, by taking action. And then, sometimes things just swing into place. You get all these seems amazing coincidences happening when you're out there doing things.
Yeah, totally. Serendipity has a far greater chance of happening when you're taking action. The same way right now we're having this conversation. I have no idea what's going to happen with that. Last week, I was helping a bunch of people, helped a girl who's got 800,000 followers on her Instagram, and just essentially did a bunch of things with her for free. And we had a phone chat, and that was cool. I have no idea how that's going to play out.
Yes. Yeah. What you put out there. Yeah.
Yeah, I really believe in the karma side. So when the action is good action and kind action, I believe in that. But also just action in principle, just the doing over the not doing. I think it compounds over time. I think one action might not change anything, but when it's consistent action over years and years and years, then it really can lead to some pretty amazing results.
Exactly. Some great connections can happen without you even knowing
it's
what's happening in that moment, but it suddenly comes into your future. So how can our listeners find out more about you and your work? Because I know you're starting a very exciting new project, a very personal project, which I'd love to talk to you about at some time, hopefully in 2019. Sure. So how can our listeners find out more about you and your work?
So my new show is called The Honest Entrepreneur Show. You're probably seeing a bit of a theme here, but I like to keep things quite candid. That's where I talk all about the harsh realities and lessons of entrepreneurship. And then my Instagram is Tom Ross Media. And I'd be more than happy if you're listening to the show. If you want to hit me up, send me a DM with anything you're struggling with. This is my passion project. So my day job as CEO, my hobby is basically video chatting and video messaging back entrepreneurs, trying to give them actionable feedback for free just because I enjoy doing it.
Fantastic. I think we need to have you having some live interaction with my audience so they can ask you lots of questions about how they can become an even more effective entrepreneur. So we'll invite you back for that.
Thank you, Nina. I'm so down for that. And thank you again for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, it's been absolutely wonderful. And thank you so much for being here. And for everyone who's been watching and listening, thank you for joining us today. I hope you got a ton of value from Tom, and see you soon. Bye-bye for now.